stands behind parties, behind a political system, a democracy actually is not possible. And isn't that the same thing with using modern technologies, that we're becoming not only just influenced by what the market gives us and we can make use of, but also that makes us not being independent anymore from our surroundings, that makes us part of the system without any door to escape after time.
I don't know. I mean, I think obviously we will be stuck in a world that is not always pleasant, that has economic crises. That's also the reason why many of my good friends are not at HAR at the moment. And well, we cannot change the whole thing as a whole overnight, but what we can do is work on living the future now that we want to live in. And information, as you said, well, it has been called the oil of the 21st century. So it's the stuff that keeps our society running, and distributing it for free is something very futuristic, and you can start right now. You just find some people to collaborate with in your city. You just don't wait until you have passed the right exams, or don't use lame excuses like, oh, I could never pull that off in my city, because I've seen that being pulled off in all kinds of cities. It doesn't have to be like San Francisco, New York, Berlin, Amsterdam. It can be in your little town, and it can affect the future you will be living by trying it out today as a better version.
Yeah, going back to the first point, probably I could tell a very short story about, I was showing this Le Monde article before. So at the Metal Lab, we had a reporter from the Le Monde, and he came straight from the Temp Lab in Paris, Vitry-sur-Seine that is. And what he wanted to hear in these interviews he did with Metal Lab members was what is our political view, what is our political standpoint. And as Hackerspace members, there was, the only answer that came up was, we don't have a political standpoint. We are non-political. And I think that if we look back and see how this movement started in the 80s, probably the 70s, depending on what you can account in towards the Hackerspace movement, politics and economics have always been a very, very, very main point in the movement. And therefore, we should not exclude these ideas, but rather looking back to the history, not like focusing on the history. We should see how we have influenced the world of today already, and how we can further influence it, even more so as technologies rise faster and faster. Now, as we are here now and see this exponential curve towards what we have to learn to keep up with the modern technologies, how can we build the schools of tomorrow? What can we teach kids in the very best way? Is it the motivation? Is it?
Yeah, so in the United States, the education system, I think, is failing. We have these standardized tests, and kids are doing worse and worse on it every year, and in the big cities, they're worse than anywhere else. I see it as one of my roles, and the role of Hackerspaces, to teach everyone, including kids of all ages, what I know, so that they can go out and learn on their own. So one of my best teachers was an advisor I had in undergrad who taught us, in his own words, how to learn. So rather than memorizing a whole bunch of facts and figures, providing an environment where we could all learn in the way that we want to learn. And the lab that I worked in was essentially a hackerspace, although we didn't call it that at a time. It was just a space where a whole bunch of people could get together, share what they know, hang out, collaborate, do projects individually or together. And we learned so much just by having this space with a few tools available to us. and a few donations by chip manufacturers like Intel with their first microcontroller chips. And what I've been doing ever since then is passing that along. There's another project that I really love that I learned about in a conference in UK a few weeks ago called Hole in the Wall. This guy in India set up a computer in a little shack that was only accessible through a little window and a place you could put your hand protected by the weather. It was a computer with a mouse and a keyboard and a monitor, and that was it. There was no sign saying, hey, come here and check it out. It was just sitting there. It turned out that kids would go up and poke around at it, see it respond, and then they would share what they learned about it with each other. They didn't really know English very well. They didn't really know much language. They weren't educated formally. But after a few months, these kids had taught themselves enough English to do searches on Google and play games on computers. This is very, very powerful. And it turns out they did some experiments. They gave them standardized tests, and these kids did just as well as the kids trained in Indian schools, which are just as good or better than in the West. So there are a lot of ways that we can educate one another. Having hackerspaces is a way where there are a lot of incredibly powerful people who are really good at certain things, if not many things, and there are many people who come that are very enthusiastic, wanting to learn, and then they learn in crews and then share what they know. I have a lot to learn from so many people who just pop into Noisebridge, and a lot of people come there to learn from me, and it's just amazing that a small group of people can learn so much from one another, and we go out in the world and share that. You know, what are our lives going to be like in just a few years, and what's the world going to be like as a result?
I think what we also...
I would like to add something to that. Like, what could we teach children? Of course, apart from the very concrete examples, what I think everyone should learn, and everyone can learn at a hackerspace, I think everyone should try to learn a different language, because it opens up your mind. You should learn as many programming languages as you can learn. You should learn how to solder, because you're not a hacker if you cannot. You should learn how to knit, how to play the board game of Go. These are all things that won't make you dumber when you learn them. But apart from that, there's something that we can give to people, which is basically confidence. Confidence about being curious. Being curious is a good thing. Being smart is a good thing. It's nothing to be bullied for or to be picked at. I come from a city in Germany, Cologne, which is kind of like center of gay culture, so we get excellent party scene there as well. But also we had more than one member, upon joining our hackerspace, they compared it to coming out. They said, finally, I have come to terms with what I am. I have found the people who I've been looking for all my life. I've always found myself a little strange and not being in the right place, and everyone is different from me, and now I'm here, and now I know I do exactly the right thing that I want.
I think Scott Bibin, who is also involved with the Yes Man, came up with a very good project title for this, which is Scientists Are the New Rock Stars. So our culture is definitely changing towards, we want to get smarter. We see the need to educate people more and more. We just don't know yet how to use these new technologies and apply them to the actual schooling system we have. And well, that kind of distracted me. And what I think that is the wrong way to use these technologies is just to simply take a computer and sit a kid in front of it and tell, well, here's the application, go ahead, learn. Because what kids don't learn anymore these days, mostly, is not only just to learn how to learn in a group, but also